Day off.
All right. Here is a story that was told to me by the brother of the one it would happen to. The story happens in Nice. I think it's Nice, right? It was told to me 20 years ago, 15 years ago. There's a Chabad house in France. I'm almost sure this was in Nice, in France. And the person who runs the Chabad house is a person called Shmuel Gorevich. He runs the Chabad house. And there's a lot of very amazing, wonderful stories about him. Also, with this Chabad house, there's a lot of crises and things like that miraculously overcame. So there was a young man that started coming close to the Chabad house. Is there some way that I can make this thing bigger? I don't know if there's some way I can make my thing bigger. 1 minute sleep. So let's remove pen. Rename, edit profile picture. I don't know. Okay, if you could just, who is this over here? 1 second. If you could put your Abba, if you could put your name up instead of your picture. Oh, there we go. Good. Thank you very much. Okay, ready? And so he had a Chabad house, and people came. Jews came from around France, as you know. Is a very free-thinking country. The Rebbe said that when people started to do tshuva, Jews started to become religious in France, that was a sign that the Mashiach is already here. That was a sign Mashiach, the redemption is here, because the main battle of Chabad was against France, and especially the philosophy of France, the free-thinking and, the how do you say, the lack of sexual very promiscuity, lack of sexual, framework, and the promiscuity, the encouraging of it. And anyway, all these things Chabad was fighting against, right? The existentialist, meaningless world philosophies. So it's very miraculous when people become religious in France, and a lot of people started. A lot of people did. Well, there was a young fellow, a handsome fellow, and he started coming to the Chabad house. He started coming little by little, a Jew. So his Judaism started waking up, and he participated more and more, and he put on tefillin, would come on Shabbat. And one day there was a Farbringen, and he stood up and he announced, I want to announce to everybody that I am engaged to be married. Oh, Mazel Tov, everyone said, Mazel Tov, very good. And Rabbi Gorevich, he sort of understood, the situation over there. So he said, tell me, or he took him aside afterwards. He said, tell me, this person you're engaged to, is she Jewish? He said, no, she's not Jewish. So, well, you know that according to Judaism, Jews are supposed to only marry Jews, and none of your children won't be Jewish. He said, I know, Rabbi, but listen, the Torah is for me. I'm not for the Torah. I do what it says in the Torah when it adds something to me. It makes me feel good, adds purpose in my life and spirituality to my life. But, there's nothing in the Torah that's going to replace this lady. She's wonderful. She has connections, and she's in the music, and then what is it, the film industry or something, and television, and like the sky is the limit, and we love each other, and we want to get married with this. So Rabbi Gorevich didn't know exactly what to say. So he said, this young man knows that it's not against it, that it's against the Torah, but he says that, the Torah is take it or leave it, whatever things I want in the Torah I take, and there are things that I do want. So, let's not wreck it up, Rabbi, and let's just, move on. So he said to the young man, listen, you're impressed by the Lubavitcher Rebbe, right? Of course, Lubavitcher Rebbe, what's the question? So he said, if you want to get married, you should have a blessing from the Rebbe. Let's find out what the Rebbe thinks. So he said, okay, that's a good idea. Now, so he wrote a letter to the Rebbe. And when he wrote a letter to the Rebbe, and he wrote a letter to the Rebbe, and he said, I'm going to deliver it firsthand. And Rabbi Gorevich said, listen, I have a brother there, and he'll meet you at the airport, and he'll take you to the Rebbe. He'll take you, show you what to do. Good. as soon as people found out that he was going to the Rebbe, so they also wrote letters to the Rebbe and they gave it to him. This, I was told the story, this was like, I don't know, 15 years ago. And the story probably occurred, 20, 30 years before that. So at that time, there was no faxes and things like that. You would send letters to the Rebbe. So they all gave letters to him. And he took these letters, a whole big bunch of letters he took to the Rebbe. So when he got to the Rebbe, so they told him to put all the letters, give all the letters to the Rebbe's secretaries. There's an office there. And he said, all the letters I'll give to the secretaries, but my letter I'm going to give by hand. He says, no, you don't do that. You give it to the secretaries, and the secretaries will give it to the Rebbe. Don't worry, you'll get an answer. Anyway, he went to America. Rabbi Gorevich's brother or his relative met him, and he took him and he gave all the letters to the office. And he said, but this letter I'm going to give to the Rebbe myself. So no, we don't do that. He said, I do. So he waited for the Rebbe to come out of his room when he prayed mincha, and he gave the letter to the Rebbe, handed the letter to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe just looked at him, took the letter, and put it in his pocket. And after the prayers, the afternoon prayers, the Rebbe went back into his room, and this young man just sat and waited. He waited, he enjoyed it, he was there, he took a long trip, also. And whatever it is, a half an hour later, however long, he got an answer. They called him, they said, you got an answer from the Rebbe. Now, usually some people waited for the Rebbe for answers for a long time. It was very rare that a person would get an answer within such a short amount of time, whatever it was. Anyway, he got an answer. So I guess the secretary transcribed the answers of the Rebbe, because the Rebbe would write like on the side of the letter or whatever. Anyway, however it was, so the answer was like this. First of all, let's see what he wrote in his letter. First of all, he wrote in his letter that I want to get married to this girl. I love her very much, and she loves me, and we want to get married. And the girl is not Jewish. She's not Jewish. And Rabbi Gorevich, my rabbi, said that I should ask you about it and, get your blessing. And that if I don't get your blessing, and he says that, and because we love each other and we're going to get married anyway, if we get your blessing. And he wrote in the end that I hope that if the Rebbe doesn't like what I wrote, that won't interfere with him giving blessing to all the other letters that I brought, because I brought a lot of letters. So, because you don't like the messenger, so maybe you won't like any of the messages I brought. So what does the Rebbe bring back to him? The Rebbe writes back to him, I'll answer the second thing you wrote first. It says there cannot be such a thing as a Jew that does not deserve a blessing. Every Jew deserves a blessing. So, and what you wrote in the beginning, that you, just 1 minute, that's right, what you wrote in the beginning, that you really love her, if you really did love her, then you wouldn't marry her, because it's not good for you and it's not good for her. You're not benefiting either one of them. So he said, the fact of the matter is that I wanted to tell a different story, and I just realized this is not the story I wanted to tell, but this is a good story also. I'll tell the next story the next time. So it's very good, So he said, that's a pretty strong answer from the Rebbe. He said, yeah, but the Rebbe, he's already married, he has a wife, and I'm not married. I'm not married. The Rebbe doesn't have this test that I've got. And not only that, I love this girl and I want to get married to her, and that's all there is to it. I just realized it's not the right story. Okay, anyway, I'll finish this story. I'll figure out how this story is also relevant to what I said before. So he goes back home and they set the wedding. And this girl is really, she's really connected to, and what happens now? No. This whole story that I'm telling you now, Rabbi Gorevich told this story over at a big Farbringen in his Chabad house, like 2-3 years after the story occurred. 2, 3 years, 4 years, but after 5 years, after the story occurred, he told the story. Okay, so and here's the story. We're continuing. So the boy comes back and he continues with the wedding. He makes all the plans. And how do they do it in France? I think they still do it that way. There's what's called the separation of church and state. So they make, first of all, a church ceremony. And afterwards, they make a ceremony by the mayor of the city. Every wedding. The church over there is the Catholic Church. French are Catholics. The Catholic have this big, ceremony, big thing where they have who knows what incense and they eat wafers or whatever thing. They bow down. They do all these other things. And there's statues all over the place. And he's got no problem. He goes into the. He's thinking about the girl or whatever they want to do. So he'll do. So he goes and he bows down and he eats the wafers. He gets anointed. Whatever the things they do over there. And 100%, Then you go to the house of the mayor. And there's that on the way from the house of from the church, the house of the mayor. So they make a couple of l'chaims and toasts and things like that. And this girl, she's like beautiful, and she's got her family is like big, strong guys, and they're big. Some people say they're connected to the underworld or whatever. Anyways, they're very powerful, well-known people. And he's about to enter into this wonderful new world of opportunity and love. And they're standing in front of the mayor. How does it go with the mayor? The mayor asks her 3 times, do you want to marry this young man? And she says, oui. And he says another time, would you want to marry this young man? She says, yes. And they marry the young man. Yes, oui. So he does that to her. And they say, and everybody's laughing. And then they say to him, the mayor turns to him and said, and you, monsieur, would you like to marry this beautiful young woman? And suddenly, all of a sudden, this weird look comes over his face and his eyes just open up wide. And the mayor says, do you want to marry this young woman? And he said, no. And everybody sort of laughs a little bit. They figure, he's making a joke, And the mayor said, please do not make a joke. Let us be serious for just, 2 minutes and it'll be all over. Do you want to marry this young woman? He said, no. He said, do you want to marry this young woman? He said, no. And her whole family jumped on him and wanted to tear him apart. His friends came to his aid. And then the whole scuffle that happened over there, the police came in. He somehow or other ducked out. He took off his tuxedo, took a cab to his house, took a credit card and his passport, and left the country. And then he wrote a letter back to her saying that he's really sorry and that he'll pay everything back, or he did pay everything back. And he said, you see that you're lucky that I didn't get married to you. You see that I'm not a stable person and that I have these mood changes and that switches and then this and this. It's a good thing that it happened beforehand. And anyway, after she finally got married and they forgot about the whole business and he paid for the band and for the everything was a small fortune, paid everything up. So Reb Gorevich is telling this whole story, right? He's telling this whole story. He said this whole story happened like 3-4 years ago. He said the young man came back and I asked him what happened. Why was it that when you got to the mayor's house, you said no? You went to the church, you bowed down, you did everything. All of a sudden you said no, what happened? He told me, he said, Rabbi, I wanted to say yes. I was all prepared to say yes. It would have taken me 1 second to say yes. But the Lubavitcher Rebbe was standing there in front of me. Said, I saw Lubavitcher Rebbe, he was standing there in front of me. I thought maybe it was just my imagination. Believe me, it was the last thing that I would want to imagine. And there he was standing there, and I couldn't say yes. I couldn't bring myself to say yes, I wanted to marry this girl. So I said no. I figured, okay, it would go away. The apparition, it stood there, and she was just standing there looking at me. And I just was so petrified that I couldn't bring myself to say, yes, I want to marry the girl. And therefore I said no. That's why I ran away. That's what Reb Gorevich is telling to this whole congregation, right? There's 100, 200 people sitting there at this big Farbringen, Yutes Kislev. Yutes Kislev is a big holiday in Chabad. And he said, and that young man got married to a nice, beautiful girl. And the family is religious. They have children to learn in our institutions. and he's sitting right here tonight with us. And if he wants to, let him stand up. And he didn't stand up. He didn't look at the man, didn't look at him, and he didn't stand up. So Reb Gorevich realized that he had embarrassed him or something. He wasn't, so he just continued on. Let's sing a song. You started singing a nigun, and that's it. After the Farbrengen, the next day, Rabbi Gorevich called up this young man, and he said, listen, I'm sorry I embarrassed you in front of everybody. I didn't, what I said in the end, I was a little bit, it took a couple of l'chaim. He said, Rabbi, believe me, you did not embarrass me at all. He said, well, then why didn't you stand up when I said? He said, believe me, I would have liked to stand up, but I just could not relive that experience. It was so frightening and petrifying that I saw the Rebbe standing in front of me. He said, it was so frightening that I couldn't relive it. I just wanted to just let it go by. So it was so real that it changed his mind totally. What do we see? That the good which is concealed in every person is there. It's there. And it just has to be brought out by seeing something else good. You saw the Rebbe, which is totally good, and that brought out the good from him. And finally, like the Rebbe said, if you really love this non-Jewish girl, you won't get married to her because it'll be not good for you and not good for her. And sure enough, that's what it was. It ended up being good for everybody. And that's the purpose of the world. And that's Parshas Emor, to say good things about people, especially Jews. Have a good Shabbos with Mashiach now. Thank you very much. We'll see you all on Sunday, 8:15 in the morning. We will learn Likutei Torah, Devar Malchut, and maybe a story. We'll see. Shabbat Shalom.